for the PIM Monthly Montage episode number 11. In fact, it was last year in December that we started the series with the sole intention of making sure that PIM, as the nation's management mentor, continues its journey in adding knowledge and value to the business community. And we are indeed privileged today to have the presence of the Director of the Postgraduate Institute of Management, Dr. Sena Kalum Gamage with us. Good evening, sir. Welcome to the forum.
Good evening, Tani.
And also this topic which we are focusing on today is indeed a very timely topic, which is none other than realistic sustainability strategies for Sri Lankan enterprises. Sustainability is a term which we hear being discussed very regularly all the time, but are the enterprises getting it right? Do organizations know what they need to do? And most importantly, you as the learning partners of PIM or the members of the Sri Lankan business community, hopefully that some of the strategies, the key takeaways from today's forum, you will be able to take back to your organization, implement it, and make sure your organization's activities become more sustainable as well. I am Tarundu Amarasekara, Senior Lecturer at the Postgraduate Institute of Management, and I am extremely privileged today to introduce our two guest speakers who are none other than Mr. Samantha Kumarasena, the CEO of the National Cleaner Production Center. Good evening, Mr. Kumarasena. And we also have with us, good evening, sir. We also have with us Dr. Nuwan Gunaratna, who is attached to the University of Sri Jayawardhanapura. Welcome, Dr. Nuwan. Absolute pleasure to be hosting you today.
Hi.
It is customary to introduce our two speakers, and let me take that privilege now. First, Dr. Nuwan Gunaratna is a senior lecturer at the University of Sri Jayawardhanapura. He earned his PhD from the Griffith Business School of Australia, from the Griffith University of Australia, and his doctoral thesis was entitled Managing the Integration Challenge Between Corporate Environmental Strategy and Environmental Management Accounting. Dr. Nuwan is also a fellow member of the Institute of Certified Management Accountants and a member of the Chartered Institute of Management Accounting in the UK. Of course, he is a PIM MBA alumni member, having obtained his MBA from the Postgraduate Institute of Management. So, Dr. Nuwan, I think I can welcome you back home in this regard.
Yes, of course.
We also have, and Dr. Nuwan is also a contributor to many of the leading journals, including the Research Journal of Material Cycles and Waste Management and Tourism Economics, and at the same time, the Managerial Auditing Journal as well, and quite a well sought after speak on sustainability. Our other guest who is joining us today is also having quite an impressive profile himself. He's an experienced manager and he's currently performing his duties in the role of the CEO of the National Cleaner Production Center. And he is also a qualified auditor in energy and ISO management systems with over 15 years of experience as a visiting lecturer across several universities and academic institutes on this very topic. Mr. Kumarasena has obtained his master's in textiles and MBA in management of technology. Mr. Kumarasena, absolute pleasure to have you with us. Welcome to PIM Monthly Montage.
It's a pleasure to join with this program today. Thank you very much for inviting.
My first question today is to Dr. Nuwan. Dr. Nuwan, here in the PIM Monthly Montage, we like to keep things very practical and realistic, as you know. Now, yes, a lot of companies talk about sustainability, but the mindset is that when the budgets come under constraint, when the budget constraints and when the budget limitations are high, how can businesses really spend on these sustainability initiatives? Because it is expensive. There is a significant investment which is involved initially, no matter what kind of sustainability initiative you may go for. So my question to you is, sir, with budgets facing severe constraints, is sustainable business investments still practical? Dr. Nuwan, you're on mute, sir.
Oh, sorry. Yes, Tarun, I think it's a very interesting question. because we know that now in the current business environment, Sri Lankan companies are facing triple crises. One is the pandemic, the health issue, and then there's the economic and the social crisis. So these two came up with the pandemic, and also we have the environmental or the economic challenge, so ecological challenge, which was there for quite some time. So I think your question is about the relationship between the economic crisis and the environmental crisis. How do we strike a balance, or whether the companies would go for investments when they're faced with budget constraints or when they're faced with an economic crisis? Well, my take would be, we have seen mixed results due to the pandemic. One is, pandemic has slowed some of the momentum towards combating climate crisis that has been built over a couple of years. So that's a negative, I should say. Then on the other hand, there's a positive, that there are, we have a newfound sense of determination, newfound sense of understanding that if we can act collectively, if we can act now, for example, if you can reduce travel, if you can reduce unwanted consumption, we can alter the climate crisis, and we can avoid the worst case scenario down the line. So we have these two imperatives working together when we find an answer for this question. Then, as you correctly said, now during this pandemic period, during this economic crisis, many of the organizations cut down on sustainability related expenses because they cannot afford that simply. On the other hand, organizations have faced a lot of uncertainty, then again lockdowns, then again supply chain disruptions, then again operational impacts, and so forth. So my first perspective on how the organizations are going to respond to this this economic crisis through sustainable business investments or the practices would be this. First, I should say that the organization's response would depend on their sustainability maturity. Now, in literature or in our studies, we discussed that usually for an organization, sustainability is a journey. So usually organizations will go through different phases when they walk along this sustainability journey. So initially they will start with a reactive approach, and later they will go for a preventive approach. So reactive is where you respond to regulatory pressure, or you respond to, let's say, certification or some external pressure. But when you move along that journey, you will see that kind of a preventive strategy where you realize the cost benefits. Then we have the proactive strategy, that's the highest level, where you embed sustainability into your organizational operation. So it becomes a recurring practice of your organization. So I would say that initially, that how the organizations are going to make the whether the organization should make this investment or not would depend on their sustainability maturity, whether they are a reactive level organization, whether they are a preventive organization, or whether they are at a proactive level. So in my opinion, if an organization is operating in a reactive stage, so they might cut down on many of these investments. Or when an organization is operating in a preventive stage, yes, they might cut down on some of the costs. But if an organization is operating in a proactive stage, they would have anticipated this for a long period, and they have adjusted their systems and the processes, and I'm sure that they will continue their sustainability practices. But there will be definitely there will be some impacts on their sustainability practices. So that's the first broader picture I would like to bring into this discussion. Secondly, the second perspective which I want to bring here is that it would also depend on how you perceive sustainability or sustainability initiatives in your organization. Now, for example, we know that for the last 2-3 decades, especially during different crisis periods, it can be tsunami, it can be civil war, some industries, they were adversely affected compared to the other industry. For instance, tourism industry was badly affected due to tsunami and also due to the civil war period from 2006 to 2009. So the crisis that we are facing today was faced by these industries some time back. And if we can look at these organizations and their learning points, I think we can gain a lot of experience through by looking at how they face the crisis. For example, some hotels, especially those who were affected by the civil war, they also had the same situation some time back. So what they did was they wanted to firstly survive. Now, for them to survive, they looked at their cost structure, how your cost structure is composed of. So when you look at your cost structure, you have energy cost, you have material cost, you have water cost, then you have labor cost and so forth. Then they started focusing on reducing the cost. So they didn't want to be sustainable, but they wanted to reduce their cost. So they focused on the biggest cost component, let's say energy cost. So when you start reducing the energy cost, you reduce your cost. At the same time, you become environmentally friendly. So even in a crisis, if you have the correct mindset, I think there's an opportunity. So it's how you perceive it. So what I suggest here is that now, as you correctly said, sometimes you can't make, let's say, big investments. That's all right, because sustainability doesn't require massive investments. You can start with some behavioral changes. For example, if you want to save energy, you can start with training your employees and mobilizing your employee knowledge and their motivation to reduce the energy cost, so that you can get the low-hanging fruits. But if you want to go for better sustainability practices, obviously there will be some cost involvement, but you can get the low-hanging fruits with minimum investment. So even in this crisis, I should say that the companies can go for sustainability and they can make sustainable things happen without much investments. So that would be that would be my take on how the companies would make the investments or not in a crisis situation.
Some excellent opening thoughts there, Dr. Gunratna. And as you very correctly said, more than a plan or a program, it's a mindset. It starts with the right sustainability mindset, and you can work your way through the low-hanging fruit, and it also depends on what level of maturity. So I think our partners learning partners who are here today, they could go back and question at what level of sustainability maturity is their organization, and then start from there. Some very interesting thoughts there. Thank you very much for that, Dr. Gunratna. I would now like to go into discussing with Mr. Kumarasena. Mr. Kumarasena, your extensive experience is especially focused towards helping manufacturers. Now, we know Sri Lanka as an economy is right now struggling with some of the manufacturing aspects, starting with the cost. The lower cost destinations like Kenya, Vietnam, they are really hitting most of our traditional manufacturing sectors. And then amidst all this, you're also saying, look, start being sustainable. So I'd like to start by asking you, for any manufacturer, how do they start planning the sustainability strategies?
Well, sustainable strategies became a need for the manufacturers with the environmental issues. Those are triggered with the economic development again. Those environmental issues are of two kinds, resource depletion issues and the environmental pollution issues. So then, therefore, we must plan our sustainability strategies with the baseline assessment on such issues. That is the starting point. As you know, we have various proactive environmental management tools that are applicable in conducting such baseline assessments. So therefore, what I suggest is, rather than being haphazard, we can adhere to those tested and proven methodologies so that we will be in the right track. We can formulate the sound sustainability strategies for the companies based on such baseline assessments. The manufacturers can adhere to those tested and proven tools planning our sustainability strategies. When you look at those tools, they start with most of the time by identifying all environmental aspects in an organization. This identification of the aspects can be a semi-quantitative assessment. A semi-quantitative method is it's good enough to prioritize the issues. Now, for example, in ISO 14001 environmental management system also, this methodology is used. If you look at the methodology followed in cleaner production, on the other hand, the baseline assessment is a quantitative assessment, especially focusing to the three resource flows: water, energy, and material. So then those baseline assessments will provide you the basis And those will help us to identify the priority issues so that with the minimum effort, the company can gain the largest output at the beginning. Then, in fact, going beyond that level, now the modern trend is to be based on the life cycle environmental impacts. It can be again a full quantitative life cycle assessment done with the life cycle software tool, or otherwise it can be a semi-quantitative method like life cycle hotspot mapping. So the life cycle is something known by all people who are gain basics in the environmental management. So that is where we consider from the extraction of raw material to the end of life disposal. So therefore, the manufacturing organizations, particularly in the design phase, they can consider this so that thereby they can make the decisions in the product designing phase to go for a sustainable product design so that environmental impacts throughout the life cycle can be minimized. So then for that matter, either full quantitative or semi-quantitative assessment methods can be used based on life cycle, as I mentioned. Again, there's another approach today that is the environmental risk management approach. So the risk assessment, then we based on the environmental risk assessment. So then, as we know, this risk assessment was there mainly in the safety and health area, then the business risk assessment. Likewise, environmental risk assessment is also there. Then in the risk assessment, we identify the various hazards. Then after that, we can quantify the risk again with the semi-quantitative methods. So then based on the risk, then we can work on the priority areas. In fact, this risk assessment, environmental risk assessment now has been a preferred tool for a lot of large corporates globally. In Sri Lanka, it is yet to be popularized, but in future it will be there. In addition to that, this risk-based approach has been incorporated into a lot of other tools like ISO management systems. So because in this risk-based approach now, previously you spoke about the preventive approach. So then here you can identify whatever the potential risks. As you know, sometimes, for example, one environmental accident in the organization could tarnish the entire corporate image. So therefore, the business will be affected. So then you can make a preventive approach if you properly identify your environmental risk. So therefore, this risk-based approach is going beyond the identification of environmental aspects in the typical ISO management systems that we use for a few decades. So therefore, basically, such approaches are there for us to make use of. So then you will be more scientific, then you will be doing the work systematically, then we can develop based on that our sustainability strategies. So therefore, whatever, when you are based on the sound baseline assessment, you can target the priority issues and can address the critical mass of the issues very effectively.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kumarasena, for those very valid thoughts. I think you set the whole practical approach right for us there. I think anybody who is joining us properly would have got an understanding of what are the practical steps that needs to be taken, the approach that needs to be taken. Because a lot of people talk about sustainability, but when it comes to the practical implementation, you know, walking the talk, they get stuck. But I think your guidance was definitely helpful there. I would now like to come to Dr. Nuwan on a very interesting question, which is actually, I believe this is more like a chicken and egg situation, because we always talk about the impact of business on climate change. But at the same time, as you very correctly pointed out in our initial discussions, there is also an impact from climate change on business. For example, a few years back, they had estimated that around $2 trillion of damages were happening to all these telecommunication satellites and all that due to the rising temperatures of the sun, as we see. So in your experience and based on your research findings, Dr. Nuwan, how bad is the impact of the current business practices on climate change and the impact of climate change on business?
Yes, Tarun, I think let me divide your question into two. One is, the impact of current business practices on climate change, then also vice versa, how the climate change is impacting the business activities. Now, if you look at the first part, the impact of current business practices on climate change, I would suggest you to go for a life cycle perspective. So as Mr. Kumarasena mentioned, so that if you can go for a life cycle perspective, you can identify the real impact of your business operations on climate change. Now, what is life cycle analysis? So it's kind of a methodological tool to evaluate the environmental impacts throughout the entire phases of a life cycle. Now, you are looking at the material extraction, then again processing of raw material, manufacturing, distribution, use, and the disposal phases. So you look at the entire life cycle to identify the environmental impacts. So if you really want to see how bad your environmental impacts are, then look at the life cycle perspective. Now, for example, I recall one good example or a case study. That is how Levi's carried out an environmental impact assessment or life cycle assessment for one of their jeans. So they looked at the entire life cycle of a jean to identify the environmental impacts. Because if you look at Levi's, they are only engaged in a particular part of the life cycle. It can be production, or it can be manufacturing and retailing. But if you look at the entire life cycle, only you can identify the real environmental impacts or the impacts on climate change. So if you look at jeans, so there will be several stages like cotton production, then fabric production, garment manufacturing, transport, distribution, retailing, then consumer use, and also finally disposal or the. They actually carried out a life cycle analysis for energy. You know what they realized? So they had the highest energy consumption during fabric production and the use stages, not during the manufacturing stage, not during their retail stage. So that's not within their purview. But the real environmental impact or the real environmental impacts are coming from different stages. So they are outside their scope. So they did a similar exercise for water consumption. Similarly, they identified they have the highest energy consumption in the cotton production stage and the use stage, because to produce or to cultivate cotton, you need a lot of water. And also, if you look at jeans, we used to wash them so many times, so that the water consumption is very high. So what does this mean? So if you take a narrow view, your climate impacts would be underestimated, because you will be only focusing on one stage of the life cycle. But if you look at the whole life cycle perspective, you can really see how bad your environmental impacts are. So that's the first part of your question, the impact of current business practices on climate change. Now let me move to the second part. So how the businesses are impacted by the climate change. Well, there is a very recent report that's I think it was issued by Deloitte. So 2021 climate check, business views on environmental sustainability. So if I remember the name correctly. So it was a report produced by covering more than 10 countries and surveying more than 750 executives. So they have reported what are the critical business challenges on climate change. So let me tell you a few of them. One is there can be, the direct or the visible impacts on a business due to the climate change. So one would be, it can be operational impacts, like your facilities can be damaged, your fields, your crop fields can be damaged. For example, if you look at the tea industry, we have the repercussions of climate change. Your tea fields are damaged, so your crop comes down, your yield comes down. So likewise. Then again, there can be scarcity of resources like water, energy, then again materials. And because of this scarcity, the cost would go up. Then again, another impact would be, you will have to bear high cost of insurance. Then sometimes you will have to take some actions to mitigate the climate change internally, at least to minimize the climate change impact. So this would create an additional cost for the organization. And also there will be regulatory costs like carbon tax, which we saw in Europe and also in Australia, but unfortunately it was reversed. Then again, there can be supply chain disruptions. So that I should say that climate change is posing one of the biggest threats or business risk at the moment for any organization?
Thank you, Dr. Nuwan, for sharing with us both sides of the story, because normally what we hear is we hear the businesses talking about only the impact on them, and the environmental scientists are only speaking about the impact that business is having on the environment. And as you very correctly said, this is an area that continues to develop, and some of the recent reports show that some of the African countries are actually planning to only focus on helping to reduce this climate change impact and get some of the grants which are there. And I believe some of the countries like Gambia and all are already working on it. And also, I think we recently saw South Africa going to have a couple of billions of dollars wiped off their debts by the developed countries if they adhere to the right, like the Paris Climate Change Accord agreements. Thank you very much for sharing that insight with us. I would now like to.
Can I add something? You know,
please.
some of these,
Yes.
sub-Saharan African countries, they are building a green wall now across Africa.
Correct. And I believe the Congo Basin is also being heavily used for that, because
Yes.
after Amazon, now they say Amazon is the lungs of the earth, but they say in another 10 years, they expect Amazon will become a savanna, because recent reports show that Amazon actually has gone beyond the point of no return, and that the tipping point has been passed. And as you very correctly said, the African countries are seeing that as an opportunity to build that green wall and get the relevant grants, because the Western countries are desperately needing a success story to show to the rest of the world to have some commitment. Am I right, Dr. Nuwan?
Yes, yes.
Interesting dynamics of politics and environmental concern both. I would now like to move into Mr. Kumarasena. Mr. Kumarasena, now you always hear this term that manufacturing leads to pollution, but how bad is the impact? Because there is one school of thought saying, no, all these pollution talks is just a myth and that it's not happening. Some people even say that climate change is a myth. Donald Trump, the president, the most powerful person in the world at one point of time, the president of the US, POTUS, as we call him, he was saying that climate change is not real. Climate change is just a myth. But how bad is the pollution that is generated from manufacturing, from a Sri Lankan context and from a global context? Your thoughts? Mr. Kumarasena, you're on mute, sir. Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Really, it's not a myth. It is in front of our eyes. So mainly we recognize this pollution to the air, to the water, and to the land. So this pollution is triggered from the air emissions, waste, as well as from the wastewater. In fact, this pollution came into the surface with the industrial development. So now we are focusing today to the industrial environmental pollution. So this was surfaced with the rapid industrialization occurred after the Second World War. You are aware that after the Second World War, developed countries diverted their resources for the economic development. It was a mass production, then having the, let's say they go for the international trade. And so therefore, under that circumstances, industrial pollution was a main issue. In fact, in this race again, for example, UK was leading. So they experienced the very first environmental pollution incident that is called London smoke, air pollution related issue. So therefore, from the coal power plants, so there's a lot of stack emissions are there, including not only carbon dioxide, but sulfur dioxide emission is there from the coal. And not only that, it has carbon particles, all sort of things. So therefore, it's a smoke which is not visible, see-through. So therefore, thousands of people died there. That was the first eye-opening incident for the world. Subsequently, then, as you know, the Japan went for a master program to double the production, GDP in the country. So then, during that journey, they also came across similar experiences, such as Minamata disease known by everybody. So then that was a water pollution issue where then by that time people were thinking that as you mentioned. Then with the past experience with the natural ecosystem, people believed once you dilute the waste, it's a solution because everything getting diluted so that it is getting assimilated or it is getting digested to the natural system. But today we are dealing with millions of man-made chemicals. Those man-made chemicals do not digest in that way. Particularly some chemicals are bioaccumulative. So then now organomercury came out in the Minamata incident is one of them. So then once you enter that one to the food chain, it doesn't discharge. So therefore in the food chain, the man is in the end of the chain. So therefore you are getting in large quantities into your human body. So that in the particular Minamata incident, it was the neurological disorder. So like that, people faced issues. In fact, this was visible more than 50 years ago, therefore, in the world. So then London smoke is 1952. Then in late 50s, we started this Minamata disease problem. So like that, in so many cities in the world, this was experienced. Now let us see the current situations. Now, for example, air pollution. Now, there's a report by WHO covering about 1,600 cities in the world. So they identify now, for example, in our neighbor in India, particularly in New Delhi, the air pollution is so severe. According to that WHO report, it says 1.5 million people die every year in India because of the air pollution related ill health. So then, not only that, it says about 220 million people in South Asia, especially most of them are children, they inhale toxic air. So then those are some facts. Then in India, as you know, this is the period now, October to December, this air pollution level in the Delhi and in that region go beyond air quality index exceeds 500. So therefore it is hazardous or toxic. So then luckily Sri Lanka is not included into the even list in UNICEF where the children are getting affected because we have been lucky for several reasons regarding air pollution. One of them is we have not that industrialized. So our main polluter, air polluter is the vehicle fleet. But still we have managed to implement the vehicle emission testing program since 2008. It is reported that this particular program has paid off for us to have low air pollution levels. In addition to that, Colombo being in the coastal city, so therefore air streams also helps us to dilute the pollution in the air pollution. Now the other cities like Bangkok also helped in that way. And so therefore we are lucky in that way, but in that case Kandy is more polluted in terms of air pollution than Colombo. So then when we come to the water pollution is the main area addressed in our regulations as well since 1980. So then industrial wastewater, every industry must treat them before discharge according to the environmental regulations. So therefore I have engaged with the projects in industries in some of the South Asian countries like Bangladesh, Pakistan. So then we see in comparatively in Sri Lanka, so those regulations are better implemented and then it is controlled, but it's a control. But I think what we like to promote is the preventive approach in all this. That means cleaner production. What we promote is in fact the source reduction. So therefore we have a long journey to go to have this pollution prevention on the ground. But technology is available, tools and techniques are available. We can reduce our pollution levels drastically if we apply those tools and techniques in the right way. That is what I would like to mention. So in addition to those things, these chemical accidents also should be attention because other than typical pollution, because starting from the this Union Carbide incident, So a lot of attention has been there. Again, tools and techniques are there to address those as well. So therefore, we have the opportunity to reduce these pollution levels.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kumar Sen. As you very correctly said, the way forward, the right direction is prevention. It prevent these things from happening, so that it's pointless trying to clean up a mess. The approach should be to prevent a mess from happening. Thank you very much, and I believe your organization, National Cleaner Production Center, is doing a great service in this regard. Dr. Nuwan, I would like to now delve into one area I know is very close to your heart. In fact, I believe your PhD thesis was also dedicated more into this. It is about sustainability accounting. So from sustainability, we come into sustainable accounting. Now, what exactly is sustainable accounting, and to what extent do we see Sri Lankan enterprises following this sustainability accounting and reporting? We've heard of certain concepts like GRI, the General Reporting Initiative, etc. But I believe now sustainability accounting and reporting has gone to another level with all these ESG reporting, ESG investment. There's a new breed of investment category called ESG investments, as you know. Now, please enlighten us on this. What exactly is sustainability accounting and how is this practiced? You could take 4 minutes and share your insights with us.
Yes, Tarun, thank you for asking that question, because a question very much closer to my heart. I'll try to, limit my answer to 4 minutes as much as possible. You know that we know the concept of sustainable development, meeting the needs of the present without sacrificing the ability of the future generations to satisfy their own needs. So that's a broad concept of sustainable development. But in 1990s, John Elkington came up with the idea of triple bottom line, where sustainability can be practiced in terms of profit, planet, and people. So when you look at sustainability as a concept, so it requires implementation, it requires operationalization. So sustainability is not a destination, but it's a process or a moving target. So sustainability needs operationalization, and sustainability accounting provides information for this. Because sustainability accounting provides information for planning, decision-making, implementation, and control activities. So going into the heart of sustainability accounting, so it's the identification, collection, analysis, and the use and the communication of information, communication of sustainability information. So in the communication aspects or the reporting aspect, as you mentioned, GRI would come into play, but sustainability accounting is a very broader concept. So we have basically two branches of sustainability accounting. One is the internal reporting aspect, because you have to use this accounting information within the organization for decision making, planning, and control. That's the management accounting aspect. Then we have sustainability accounting, the reporting aspect, the external reporting aspect, that's the financial accounting or the sustainability reporting branch. So what we normally see is sustainability reports, integrated reports, that's the external reporting branch. But we have a broader when we say sustainability accounting, it's a very broader concept. So sustainability accounting can take place in 2 ways. It can either take place in physical terms, or it can be in monetary terms. So if you look at the physical terms, you can do the accounting in terms of kilograms, liters, meters, then the numbers or physical numbers. So that's why we have physical sustainability accounting systems. Now, then we have the monetary sustainability accounting system. That's, we do the accounting in terms of rupees and dollars. That's what we are familiar with. But when you look at the broader picture, that's the physical as well as monetary sustainability accounting, we actually, enlarge the horizons of accounting. Because usually when we say accounting, we have the double entry system, the, T accounts and so forth. But when it comes to sustainability accounting, when we bring in the physical accounting aspects, it becomes a very broader concept, which is practiced by not only the accountants, but by the engineers, environmental managers, or sustainability managers. For instance, let's say that an organization has an energy strategy, so that they need to go for renewable energies. Now, before you make the investment, you need to do an investment appraisal. So you need to do a payback analysis. So you need to get the numbers. So these numbers and dealing with the numbers is the sustainability accounting aspect. So you will do an investment appraisal and you will identify the payback. And thereafter, once the investment is made, you might get those figures into budgets, and you might get those figures into your KPIs. And then you will do, let's say, variance analysis. This is all accounting. So we look at sustainability accounting from a very broader perspective. And also your question had another part of how about the, the use of sustainability accounting in Sri Lanka. Well, if you look at the reporting aspects, that the financial reporting aspects, so we have a large number of companies reporting on sustainability. For instance, I think in 2019, we had about 120 odd companies preparing sustainability reports, which represents nearly 40% of the listed companies in Sri Lanka. Then when you look at the management accounting aspect, most of the companies use energy accounting, water accounting, then waste accounting in the Sri Lankan context. But and also they are using sustainability accounting information for especially efficiency improvements, then budget preparation and KPIs. But through my research, we have identified that they are not using sustainability accounting information for pricing or even managing risk or long-term investments. Yes, Tarino, I think I'm within my time limit, and if you
absolutely, and in fact, to be honest, you're talking about energy efficiency, you're also time efficient. You still have 1 more minute you can go for if you want to.
All right, okay, just
you're showing us efficiency in practice. We appreciate that.
All right, thank you very much. Just let me add one more thing. So I said that so many companies are reporting on sustainability. That's the financial accounting aspect. But internally, even without reporting, you can have a lot of sustainability accounting practices, practiced by engineers, practiced by environmental managers or sustainability managers. Then again, this is about the large corporate sector. And also we have, SME sector. In Sri Lanka, we have 90% of the SME sector. Then again, we have a huge government sector. So we don't know the sustainability practices of these sectors, especially in the SME sector and the government sector. So but one thing we know is that, they are at a very minimum level.
All right. So long as the famous saying goes, many a miles to go before I sleep. So our Sri Lankan enterprises too have many a miles to walk before they can even say that they are actually, accounting for, because in business, Dr. Nuwana, I believe you would agree, we can always talk about things, but only what gets measured gets controlled, and accounting is a form of measurement. So if you are not measuring or if you are not accounting for our sustainability initiatives, I believe what you're saying is we have a problem.
Yes, and actually,
my next question is to you. Now, in terms of, if you take any organization, what do you think we need to do to make sustainability goes beyond just being a talk, but to make sure that it gets implemented properly? And let me ask you this, does it start from the top with the CEO wanting the organization to be more sustainable? What are your thoughts on this, sir?
Of course, you're absolutely correct. So then the leadership is the key. So, yes.
We can hear you, sir. We can hear you. Go ahead.
Yes. I just checked. Because usually I may say that is, if the leadership is committed, then the 50% of the work done. That is through my experience of 25 years. But still, it is in the books as well. Having understood this fact, all proactive environmental management tools also has incorporated the leadership as a prerequisite for the success of the sustainability journey. Now, for example, organizations all over the world implement these ISO management systems. That is mainly to plan, implement, and to continually improve the sustainability functions. Then it includes environmental management system, ISO 14001, then energy management systems, ISO 50001, then occupational health and safety management systems, 45001. All are related to the sustainability performance. Now, in these all popular management system standards, leadership is identified as an essential clause. And in fact, the leadership in those standards has been made accountable for the effectiveness of the system. Then going beyond that, the leadership shall ensure the policies in place, objectives are in place, and planned actions are there to achieve the objectives. Then the resources are committed by the organization. In addition to that, then leadership should ensure the continual improvement as well. Those are given clauses in the standards. So therefore, because on the other hand, so I have seen these revisions over the years of these management systems. Then from revision to revision, they have strengthened and they have given more weight to the management commitment or leadership. Leadership is the, even terminology has changed in the standards. Earlier it was the management, top management. Now it is worded as leadership. So therefore leadership is given more responsibility in a way and they are accountable. Not only that, in the latest standard says your sustainability function should be aligned with the organizational strategic direction. That is very important because we have seen there are incidents where sustainability goals are set, but in the strategic direction they make some business decisions which are conflicting with the sustainability goals that they have set. It doesn't mean that you have to change the strategic direction based on the sustainability journey, but your sustainability roadmap can be aligned with the strategic direction. You can do quite a lot of things in that way. So that responsibility is also given to the leadership because leadership must ensure that, as you know, then you must be first effective, then you can become efficient. So therefore, this is the right thing. In fact, in clean production methodology also, since 90s, this management commitment has taken as a prerequisite to make the cleaner production successful in an organization. So therefore, we can understand the priority given for that one. In addition to that, in cleaner production literature, there's a terminology called cleaner production champions. That is not the top management, but still in teams, you have the leadership. That means, on the other hand, if you look at any organization where cleaner production implementation has been successful, then there is a cleaner production champion. That means it will be a one individual who has taken the leadership and interest and become committed, and so that he has taken the journey through. So therefore, it is evidenced always that there must be a leadership, at least the situational leadership, to make the activities, our plans, projects successful. In fact, in addition to the leadership, the organizations must follow the organized systematic approach. That is, again, by adhering to the standard methodologies, tools and techniques, you can do so. So therefore, the management should give the right direction. Then, of course, it will be achievable. So then when you have this right plan in place, then of course you can support with the proper human resources, trained personnel. Then in fact, the operational level people can take the things. In addition to that, I would like to mention, to make it successful, then all the time we have to go for the concept that, what you can manage is only the things that you can measure. I think you came out with that idea a little while ago. So then it is also obvious because whenever, let's say, for example, now if a company is going to implement a solution to improve the energy efficiency, we always advocate, why not you put up a sub-meter for that energy stream or electricity stream so that you can measure it before the implementation and after the implementation so that you can report it. Once you report, it will be a success message so that others also tend to do. And so therefore, that is also another important thing to make it happen, because then you can quantitatively communicate. So that is also very important to make it to be happen.
Mr. Kumar Sena, thank you very much for your thoughts. As you very correctly said, something strategic of this nature, something of this strategic nature like sustainability has to start with the top leadership. The leaders have to set the right direction for the rest of the organization to follow on this regard. I believe now it's time with the last 10 minutes being left for us. It's time to move on into the questions from the audience. And the first question is for Dr. Nuwan Gunratna. Dr. Nuwan, can carbon disclosure projects or CDPs be considered as a part of sustainability reporting. Your thoughts on this, Dr. Wan?
Yes, of course, because we have so many, carbon disclosure project comes under sustainability reporting, and it offers you a framework or a mechanism to report your carbon. But when you look at, it's mainly focusing on carbon, energy, and the carbon aspects, which is famous in, Europe and also in Australia. Apart from that, we have other comprehensive sustainability reporting frameworks like GRI. Then again, we have UN Global Compact. Then again, integrated reporting aspects. And also, I would like to mention that all these different projects or these different initiatives are now going to get together, and they are going for a harmonized way of reporting. So I think in the next 2-3 years, we will see that a lot of harmonization in sustainability reporting as it took place in financial reporting arena.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wan. Mr. Kumarasena, we have a question through our Facebook audience for you, with asking whether even for a smaller manufacturer, whether cleaner production is an applicable concept.
Of course, cleaner production is applicable for irrespective of the scale of the organization, particularly when you look at the set of proactive environment management tools. So some tools such as ISO management systems, sometimes small industries face a problem because of the documentation, etc. But cleaner production methodology has been made to be understandable for everyone, as well as you can implement at the ground level. So therefore, it's mostly a ground level tool. So many small industries all over the world has implemented cleaner production successfully. So therefore, it's a must very appropriate tool for a small industry.
Dr. Nuan, I think given your experience in both the academics as well as the business sector, I think the next question is definitely valid for you. Do you think that there is enough being done at the education sector of Sri Lanka to make the business leaders aware about sustainability and the importance? Because we see a lot of the global universities having specialized programs. It plays a big part in the curriculum. Your thoughts about the emphasis given to this subject in Sri Lanka?
Sadly, I am not happy with the level of emphasis in terms of education for sustainability. At the university level, yes, we have done certain things. I gratefully recall the support I received from Director PIM, Senaka, Dr. Senaka Kalum, when he was the head of the department, he supported me immensely in introducing a sustainability accounting course. But I'm sure that he would agree with me the challenges we had in continuing and offering a sustainability accounting course. But in terms of the general...
Dr. Wan, I hate to interrupt, but I must at this point say that even today, this topic was suggested by our director, Dr. Senaka Kalungamage. So we are indeed grateful for him for setting the trend for us in that direction now at PIM.
Yes, of course. I think an institution like PIM should take the lead and, should pioneer sustainability, corporate sustainability among the corporate sector. So maybe you can take two parts. One would be the, you can have operational changes, and also you can have curriculum changes, introducing new courses, then introducing, management development programs. At the same time, you can portray your organization as a sustainable organization or a carbon neutral organization. So I think that would be the way forward. But coming back to your question, in terms of the education, I'm not really happy. I'm really, disappointed about the way that the sustainability is taught in the education system in Sri Lanka. Because I remember my son, when we were in Australia, when he was going to year one, not even year one, prep, that is year 0 in the Sri Lankan context. So he knew about 3R concept. So he knew about the waste management, and he knew the importance of recycling. But we don't see these things happening in our education system. So we need education from year 0, and also gradually we have to improve the level of the dose of sustainability in the education system in Sri Lanka. And also we need to follow, let me use this term, and a transdisciplinary approach to sustainability, sustainability education. So that because sustainability is an interdisciplinary subject, and we need to provide that interdisciplinary approach to sustainability education in the country. So there is a long, long way we have to go in terms of sustainability education.
Yes, indeed, Dr. Noor, as you very correctly said, PIM being the nation's management mentor, I believe PIM too will have a major role to play, that especially taking this message to the corporate sector, because we see a lot of Sri Lankan companies doing sustainability related initiatives, but sometimes it's as a side project or something that is nice to have, something that is good to put on the annual report. But the true core of sustainability is not doing it for the show, but doing it from the heart and connecting it with the business strategy. Gentlemen, with the last 5 minutes being upon us, I would now like to hand over the forums to both of you to make your concluding remarks. You could both take 2 minutes each and give your concluding remarks. Mr. Kumarasena, I would like to start with you.
Yeah. So then, as we know, it's a long journey for the industries to go ahead. So therefore, anyway, we have to get updated as the industrialists regarding the novel tools and approaches in this arena. Particularly, I would like to mention, other than those conventional tools, we have novel tools such as eco-innovation. So eco-innovation targets change in the business strategy of organization, then change in the business model accordingly. So thereby, you inbuilt the sustainability at the strategic level. Now, just to introduce this, in fact, we are working with, we have worked with several sectors by now in last couple of years to introduce this eco-innovation for the industries. So the difference, I thought this, bringing this to the stage because all other sustainability tools that we are familiar with are applicable at the operational level. But with the eco-innovation, which is applicable at a strategic level, you will not work alone. You will work with your supply chain partners. So therefore, as you know, in the management also, you realize that the opportunities are much greater when you work along the supply chain rather than working at organizational level, because you have exploited most of the opportunities at the organization level in working. Resource efficiency also same for the well-performing industries mainly. They have done, they are the maximum in the energy efficiency, water efficiency. I'm referring to the best level of companies, but they have opportunities if they work in the supply chain. And so therefore, this kind of novel tools are in place. So therefore, the industrialists must get updated with this new knowledge. Then a lot of ample of opportunities are there for them to make the sustainability a reality. As we know, as NCPC, we never promote sustainability at a cost. The sustainability strategies we promote always paying off. That means you have the financial return when you protect the environment. So in that sense, this new knowledge will be useful so that you are making money while becoming more sustainable. That's what I would like to mention at the end.
Thank you, Mr. Kumarasena. Thank you very much. So I believe the summary is sustainability is a team sport. You work together across your entire supply chain rather than you only being sustainable. When your entire supply chain is sustainable, that's where the impact is. Not trying to pass the buck to somebody else and, finally the supply chain partners end up polluting more. That's not the way forward. It's a combined team effort. Thank you so much for your concluding thoughts. They are very vital and timely indeed. Dr. Nuwan, the forum is yours to make your concluding remarks.
Yes, I know. Thank you, Tharinder. I know it's 8:29. So in the best interest of time, I'll be very brief. Now, for me, sustainability is a journey. It's a journey for an individual. It's a journey for an educational institute, and it's a journey for any corporate sector organization. So you will start with some initiatives, but if you have the right set of leadership, as it was emphasized by Mr. Samantha, and if you have the right set of leadership, if you have the right set of tools, and if you have the right set of individuals who would drive this forward, sustainability will not be a fragmented approach or fragmented exercise in your organization. It has to be an organizational wide approach. And also, as Mr. Samantha mentioned, it has to be along your supply chain, across your organization, you can have sustainability. So if you are having these right tools, techniques, and the leadership support, I'm sure that you can be really adventurous in your sustainability journey. Thank you very much.
And with that, to all our guests, I would like to say it was indeed a very insightful session. We had both Dr. Nuwan Gunaratne and Mr. Samantha Kumarasena bringing in their years, decades of experience and sharing it with us. You held nothing back. You laid it out all on the table. Despite the limited time, I believe we were able to cover multiple different dimensions. And I'm indeed thankful for the presence of the director of PIM, Dr. Sena Kalumkamake, who was here the entire time, listening to all the valuable thoughts that were shared. Doctor, I'm quite sure you found the session to be very insightful as well.
Yes, Taride, thank you very much, Dr. Nuwan, as well as Samantha. I think we need to continue this discussion in the future as well, how we can incorporate those things, as Nuwan and Samantha very correctly mentioned, even for our EDB programs, whereby the industry leaders need to be educated with this area, and they will be able to use these techniques and methods to implement in their organization. I believe, as Nuwan mentioned very correctly, we have to have some kind of plan whereby we can educate these small medium industries where most of the people are not knowing some not very expensive tools where they can implement and they can start up to understand the sustainability concepts. Whereby we will think, we will further discuss with Dr. Nuwan and also with Samantha and get some kind of support from them to implement those things in future. Thank you very much, both of you gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
And with that, we would be wrapping up today's discussion. I'm quite sure you found it very insightful as well. A big thank you to all the learning partners who joined us via Zoom as well as through Facebook. And indeed, once again, I'm extremely grateful to our two esteemed, distinguished speakers whom we had today, Dr. Nuwan Gunaratne and Mr. Samantha Kumarasena. Thanks for joining us and sharing your valuable thoughts with us. And with that, we would be concluding today's session. Thank you. And we will meet you next month in the second Thursday of November, celebrating 1 year of PIM Monthly Montage in the 12th episode. I'm Tharindu Amrasekar signing off from the PIM Monthly Montage for today. Good night and have a great month ahead.